Video game adaptations. They never live up to the source material. It's a fact of life. Be that as it may, none have come as close as HBO's record-breaking hit, The Last of Us. Whether you played the original game back in 2013 or were new to the franchise altogether, there's no denying this series' popularity spread as fast as cordyceps itself. By striving to remain faithful to its source material, it sparked a global pandemic. It sparked a global phenomenon that would raise the bar for every video game adaptation to follow. Adapting a massively successful game for television presents a number of pitfalls, first being identifying the audience. Fortunately, The Last of Us understood its audience from the get-go. Everybody. By crafting a magnetic prologue, Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann cemented this series as appointment television, equally as rewarding to loyal fans as it was inviting to new ones. Whether you were aware of how pivotal moments unfolded or not, you were pulled to the edge of your seat all the same. As such, this series had the world's undivided attention from episode 1, definitively establishing itself as a series for everybody. Just as crucial to identifying the audience was accurately capturing the feel of the game, and not just from an aesthetic standpoint. After all, recreating iconic imagery and scenes meant nothing if we didn't believe the characters inhabiting them. All this to say, Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey didn't just play the roles of Joel and Ellie, they were the characters. Their chemistry felt organic from the start, which was essential to watching the evolution of their relationship, the fundamental selling point of the series. And that believability was just as strong for supporting characters, who made lasting impacts with very little screen time, thanks to some top-tier acting. These performances, in addition to cameos by the game's original cast, plus the inclusion of its distinct score, went above and beyond in recreating what made the game so special. Paramount to bringing this adaptation to life was honoring the game's story, and while that story centered around the relationship of Joel and Ellie, Mazin and Druckmann made minor changes along the way that enhanced the overall experience. Episode 1's cold open was an addition that immediately set the tone by foreshadowing the immense weight of humanity's collapse. Changes to Tess's death in Episode 2 served as a brutal wake-up call that this journey would not be without sacrifice. At the same time, Episode 5's edition of Sam seeking comfort in his final moments would greater exhibit lost-haunted Ellie just as much as Joel. What's more, the decision to add backstory to how Ellie became immune was handled in a way that made sense and didn't lessen her significance. These changes made for some deeply emotional scenes and collectively enriched the narrative. Now, for all the changes that elevated the experience, there were those that fell flat. Explaining how the fungus operated would have been great world building if it hadn't been abandoned as quickly as it was established. Not to mention, there was a considerable lack of infected in the series, with the threat more often being the worst parts of humanity that remained, which called into question the severity of Joel's decision. Did he really doom everybody by saving Ellie, if the infected were all but irrelevant? By far the most glaring issue of the series was its pacing. It felt way too rushed. For a season consisting of just over 8.5 hours, there simply wasn't enough time for 2 flashback episodes. Especially when Episode 3, while very moving, was self-contained, and did little to strengthen the bond between Joel and Ellie, in comparison to Episode 7. The result was a journey that often felt sporadic, at times even subpar to the game, and a finale that was criminally short for what would trigger major repercussions. At the end of the day, there's no question this series was great television, though arguably failed to match the same level as its source material. Regardless, it undeniably raised the bar for what a good video game adaptation could be, ultimately nailing the game's core concept. Navigating the end of the world is never about how, but why. Identity, belonging, love. Those universal needs that endure and survive with The Last of Us.